Good morning from Zürich. You're listening to Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Coming up on today's program, Juliet Linley is back again. Also, Grgić is also somewhat fresh from Paris. But Juliet, I will start with you. You've got a lot of papers in front of you. Where are we going to start today?
Well, you mentioned Mar-a-Lago face. I don't know a lot about that, but we will discuss that
Mar-a-Lago face will be a conversation,
and the casting for the Trump cabinet. But then also, I'd love to talk about the speed trap they have just installed right below my house, and this whole very Swiss phenomenon. And then why not? Should we look at other stories too, coming from around the world?
We should. That's our job. Also, we're going to be getting the latest from the Bosphorus.
I'm Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, and coming up later, I'll be talking about the rebels' lightning advance in Syria, about the fake dollars circulating in Turkey, and about winter, which has finally come to the Mediterranean region.
That's kind of bad news. Plus, we'll speak to Katja Weber, one of the really sort of the founding figures of Christmas markets here in Zurich. That's just, of course, just around the corner at Bellevue. It's the 1st of December, 2024. Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from Zurich, this is Monocle on Sunday with Tyler Brûlé.
And good morning from Dufourstrasse, where the sun is shining. Juliet, I know this morning you probably woke up. There's always that bit of a lid over the lake at this time of year, a little bit foggy, but the sun is coming out. I think it's going to be a very beautiful day here. Also, Grgić is also here as well from the, of course, security studies team at ETH. Gorana, I'll start with you. We were in Paris actually only a few days ago. We had a lovely media summit, but you sort of had the not, I would say, particularly easy task of also getting your crystal ball out. I'm at the Crayon, which is sort of appropriate, and looking over the horizon as to where the world is heading. So it was a bit of an interesting task, but I have to say people adored it. So thank you very much for that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and it was a wonderful event, and truly no crystal balls, but crystal chandeliers to look through, and trying to make sense of the world and the kind of crazy times that we live in, where it seems that we've sort of switched a lot of paradigms, whether it comes to security, global economy, and of course with all of the developing stories just over the past couple of days, it seems that we have a lot of these things that we haven't paid attention to, maybe to our detriment, and now popping up as well in the headlines.
Indeed, and as you heard, of course, at the top in the news headlines, really Syria, Aleppo has emerged as a new global lead story. As you said, maybe something which was a little bit by the wayside. We're going to be heading to the Bosphorus to talk to Lucinda Smith. I'm setting you the task of breaking down what is happening there. We'll come to that in a bit. Juliet, you have a crisis around your house, as you were saying. They've installed one of those horrible new grey speed traps at the bottom of your house, actually, right? Not to sort of clock the speed of your children, but the people whizzing past your very fine.
They are really unaesthetic, aren't they? They really are ugly.
But they do sneak up and get you. I mean, there is something about that grey. And that you just do not see them, but they're not small.
They do hide them.
They're 2 meters tall, and and of course you can't move them. But anyway, so it's a crisis in your house because obviously, did your husband get?
None of us have got them, but there is this sudden sense of Schadenfreude in the house as soon as you see this flash, and it's really a bright flash, as you know.
Yes.
And especially
not that I've been flashed that many times.
No, Tyler, I'm sure you haven't, and certainly not by the one near my house. But it's insane how all of my family are now like cheering when someone gets flashed and is driving by, and the whole living room lights up. And friends have been saying, "Can we come over and have a drink and sit on your terrace and watch people get flashed?" And then there was a whole story in our local newspaper, Der Kuznachter, all about which is the speed trap in Switzerland that earns the most. And it's actually a speed trap in Baden. The city of Baden. And last year it earned, I think we're looking at 1.5 million, just that one speed trap. Now, as you know, in Switzerland, it's a great way for making money for the police corps in general. But and the city of Zurich particularly has a lot of them. But isn't it interesting how on the one hand, our son was like, I'm going to go and warn the drivers coming down to slow down. And
because they couldn't arrest him, could they? Because it's probably too
he'd be doing them such a favor. But
would.
Then others are like, no, let's watch them get caught.
Andrew Tuck, our editor-in-chief, is standing by in London this morning. Andrew, has anyone flashed you recently?
Sadly not. Those days are gone.
Good morning, Andrew. You're just, are you fresh from Athens or, because you returned yesterday, but you were doing a bit of there's many twirls on stage this week. Andrew, what a week you've had. There you are on stage at the Crayon in Paris, and then you're with the PM of Greece later in the week.
I know. I think some tired old pop stars haven't been in as many stages as I have at my age this week. So it was good. It was good. I had a very wonderful week. And yes, I was with the Prime Minister of Greece, Mitsotakis, this week at another great hotel, the Grand Breton. And we were talking about what's next for Greece, for tourism, and about the need to be cosmopolitan in this world. And it's a funny word that's kind of fallen out of use in many senses. But Greece is holding on to this notion about being cosmopolitan, about being welcoming and worldly and intelligent and engaging. So, yeah, a great week.
Andrew, let's maybe dissect that a little bit. And I'm going to pull in Juliet and, of course, Gorana on this. Why did cosmopolitanism become a bad word? Just because it's, it's multisyllabic, because it suggests or has an association maybe with an old magazine, or I mean, the magazine, of course, is still around. But Andrew, I'll start with you. Why did we reach this place that it became equated sort of with the elite in a way? But as you said, cosmopolitanism is not just about wealth. It is about a worldview. It is about welcoming people in. It is about a level of sophistication.
I think that what's great about the word is it encourages people to be better, do better, to want more, to engage, to be interested. And I think, when you see many politicians around the world, that isn't the kind of debate that's going on. But in Mitsotakis, you have somebody who, over the summer, I asked him, he said that they didn't have any protests against tourism in Greece. People still remember what under-tourism looked like, and they still know what it looked like after the COVID years when they were concerned about the revenue coming back into the country. So they're building a strong economy where tourism plays a really key part, but they're kind of the checks and balances. But afterwards, I was chatting to a woman who's from one of the big hotels there, and she was really interesting. She said that their biggest number of visitors come from the US. The US is meant not just kind of Greek Americans, but Americans coming to Athens. And she said that what's interesting for them is that a lot of these visitors, they've researched what they want to see. They don't just want to go and see the Parthenon. They want to really understand Greece. And she said that the most popular tour that they do is like a philosopher's walk, where a philosopher from one of the universities in Athens takes people from the hotel on a walk. She said people say, it was a life-changing experience. How amazing in this day and age that young families coming to Athens want to go on a philosopher's walk. And I think this is what they've been trying to talk about, that they have some issues with Santorini and Mykonos, which were discussed on stage and acknowledged. But actually, they're pulling in a really diverse group of visitors, and it's not just package holidays. They need some of that, but they're really beginning to pull in a very educated, slightly wealthier tourist who's spending big in Greece.
Juliet, I want to go to you. Cosmopolitanism. Why did we arrive at this point? Do you think? And again, is this a bit of an Anglo curse against the word, that the sort of this fatwa against it, or would you say it even exists in other maybe even Latin quarters as well?
Cosmopolitanismo. I'm not sure. I mean, the word is always probably associated with entitlement and privilege, which is a bit of a pity. On the other hand, look at it this way: not the entire planet does travel the world and have the open perspective that we all think that should be normal to be had.
And Gorana, there's the challenge.
Well, I would probably nest it in the broader sort of backlash politics that we've seen across the political West for a decade or so now. And I think that cosmopolitanism in that sense would be tied to the idea of globalism. And this is something that a lot of these populist right-wing parties have been actually very firmly against. And if we kind of think about it in that context of the vertical struggle of us the people and those like elites, right? Those that are advocating different types of integration, whether it is through institutions like the European Union or various other intergovernmental organizations. There is that kind of echo that's painted quite negatively. And then again, it has to do with those kinds of themes and motives that are very much part and parcel of any of those kind of populist parties' campaigns, which is that those people who are, as Juliet said, well-traveled, that are worldly, don't recognize what the struggles are of the kind of common man. And again, that's at the core of what we've seen in the populist politics that has been around now for basically, some 10 good years.
Andrew, just let's go back to Athens quickly, and then I want to then head west back to Paris from the start of the week. Just the sort of the mission of you being on stage with Mitsotakis. What this was obviously tourism, economic development focused, and as you said, obviously, yes, there's this embrace of cosmopolitanism on one side, but if you could sort of, if there are sort of 3 or 5 sort of mission points that Greece wants to achieve, what are they?
Well, it was part of an event called Greece Talks, and a well-organised event where they had everybody from architects and designers through to hotel operators talking about their ambitions. I think for Greece, they want to do a few things. Mitsotakis, I said at the end of the day, I said, let's challenge people in the room. What is your challenge to all of these people? And he said, look, we're on site. The business community here works well with government. But he said, what I say to everybody every day is, we have to be the best. We have to be the best in hospitality around the world, and we shouldn't settle for anything less. The other thing, he wants to make sure that the wealth comes down the chain, that people in local communities see the benefits from this. He wants people to be trained better. He said, it's unbelievable that Greece has got to this point and it doesn't have a good hospitality school. He said, how have we allowed that to happen? So he wants to see this as a bigger economic story as well. And then that cosmopolitan word came up again, because I think that what's interesting for Greeks is, because they have such a diaspora, they're kind of naturally cosmopolitan, even if it doesn't mean about being part of an elite. People travel to see their families overseas. They've gone and lived abroad. Nearly everybody I spoke to, where did you do your MBA? I did it at Brown. I did it in Paris. Amazing kind of connections where people had studied overseas, and I think that's what he also wants to outline. Is this is good for everybody if they get this right.
So, Andrew, then just at the start of the week, we were in Paris on Tuesday. It was edition 3 of an event that we started a few years back in London. We were doing it at the Grand Hyatt, which was a media summit. It's an afternoon where we bring together various speakers from various news organizations to talk about the state of the world, of course, to talk about the state of the media. We brought it to Paris this year with about probably, I would say, 70 to 80 people in the audience. It was by invitation only, so our listeners, don't feel sad that you didn't get sort of an email blast. And this was Andrew, I would say it was quite B2B, wasn't it? That we had our brand partners in France and a little bit beyond, and also at the same time, all of the agencies that we work with as well. And and I would say, aside from Gorana, we had Louis Dreyfus from Le Monde, we had Christine O'Krant there, Aurelia Rauch talking about a variety of things. Maybe just if you can sort of think of maybe 3 headline points before we go to Gorana, but what stood out for you this week in terms of when we think about where the media is or where it's also heading as well?
Well, we often dodge this topic, but I think the AI topic came up again and again. It was fascinating to see. I don't think the conversations we had about AI in that room you'd have had it a year ago. These were traditional newspaper groups who are already using it to translate from French into English. And we had this amazing story about Christophe Armand. He has a podcast called Alles Gesagt with 2 hosts, and they had Brian Ferry on, and they recorded it all in English, and then they used AI to turn it into German. They put it out in German now. Brian Ferry sounding like a fluent German speaker. And I'm still thinking to myself how it still makes me a little uncomfortable. But he was bullish about it. This doubles the audience. And he said to us, if I could put Brian Ferry speaking Mandarin, I would definitely do that. I think Aurelia was amazing, talking about Burgos Bank and being funny. And I think that we forget, the world, certainly the commercial world, has often forgotten how to be funny for belief in being everything inclusive and not offending. And here was a woman who works for a bank that is actually confident to say it's nice being rich. And how many banks dare say that? So I thought that was amazing as well. And of course, Gorana had the room, and it was amazing to see people just spellbound, wondering what lay over the horizon as we got this kind of briefing on the world order and what lies ahead. And amazing, you could throw any question, what's going to happen in Ukraine? And maybe this weekend we're seeing maybe a shift in what might happen. But anyway, the answers came back simple, clear, and grounding.
I thought what was great about Aurelia being on stage, I think she reminded people that, as you said, the power of humor, the power of just great copywriting. So much of what she showed on stage wasn't about imagery. It was just about the power of words and the power, of course, to be a little bit cheeky, a little bit saucy, not to offend people. But to push it a little bit. And I think and of course, probably many of our readers will know and be familiar with. There's a page which has been running from their bank. In the magazine, which says nouveau riche with a question mark, better than no riche, and I think that is probably at the core of a lot of what they've been, not everything, but certainly has been a guiding force and gives you sort of the tone of what she's talking about. Gorana, they gave you, and as Andrew said, it was a big look over the horizon moment. But I think Andrew, I don't know what you thought, but I thought one of the most interesting questions I think came from a German gentleman in the audience who was asking a little bit about sort of the guiding force, the guiding hand behind the Trump administration. This is not just down to one man and his family and a group of advisors, but where is this? And that it's not something which has been with us again only for one established administration, one on the rise and one in between. This goes back much further.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a question about what is Donald Trump's North Star, right? And I, not wanting to put everyone to sleep, but I just wanted to provide a bit of a historical context because that type of American populism that Donald Trump practices, the sort of nativist themes, those have been with the United States in the polity for quite some time, actually going way back when to Andrew Jackson, who was the 7th president of the United States, and this kind of Jacksonian tradition in U.S. politics is actually nothing new. So kind of contextualizing some of these things, of course, Donald Trump is a bit of his own kind in the way that U.S. foreign policy and politics in general in the post-World War II era works, because he's the one who has, for the first time, actually said that all of these institutions and kind of norms that the United States actually established out of the rubbles of World War II that have meant to work in U.S. favor, right? He said, no, actually, they are all working against us, right? The system is rigged against us. We need to disband it. And in that sense, he is a disruptor, right? And he has put forward some ideas that haven't been around for quite some time. But again, we shouldn't lose sight of just the historical context in which Donald Trump's presidency has emerged, as well as the kind of historical precedent for this. So, it was a bit of a nerding out, which I like to do when I teach my U.S. foreign policy classes. And so it gave me a great joy, actually, to present just one quadrant of that 2x2 matrix around political traditions in U.S. foreign policy, one of which is the Jacksonian one.
Let's maybe move beyond what happened on various stages across Europe. Juliet, you've got there's two interesting stories. You've got we can nerd out. There's a Corriere della Sera story which is interesting about sort of the world of artisanship, but also you've picked up something interesting from the Wall Street Journal. Also a story in Italy which is about Cortina, and of course Cortina is going to be one of the twin cities, of course, for the next round of the Winter Olympics. We can almost say almost next year.
Almost next year, 2026 is going to be hosting the women's alpine events, and basically the Wall Street Journal journalist is saying, if you want to go to Cortina, go now. It's ideal. You don't have the Olympic chaos and circus that descends upon these towns. And in fact, if you do go now, there are a lot of hotels or restaurants that are being refurbished, and there are a lot of sort of Baustelle or construction sites. However,
do they use the word Baustelle in Cortina? I'm just wondering.
That's exactly what she says. Her conclusion is that it's delightfully Italian as opposed to the nearby ones that have a heavily Germanic
What is Baustelle? Costruzione? No.
Construction. Sì, costruzione.
Okay.
Sì, I'll tell you later.
Okay, good.
But she just talks about the great combination of great food as well as great landscapes, as great people, because people from Rome and Milan consider Cortina along with Stade and St. Moritz. Not sure that you do, Tyler, but it is kind of an iconic
I've never been to Cortina.
To ski and be seen. You've never been?
No.
We will be going together.
Okay.
But then the other story out of Milan was, you've got the Fiera del Mobile, you've got the Settimana del Design, and now there's the first artisans trade show, La Fiera degli Artigiani. Not going to go into it too much, but there is an interesting, which seems pretty still a throwback to pandemic times, where a lot of professionals who have even studied abroad and worked abroad in marketing and so on are going back to their family companies, maybe taking them over. So often in southern Italy, Italy, often in agriculture. So you have one gentleman who used to work in Philadelphia, and now he's gone back and he's making bags and watches out of olive wood from his family's olive groves. Okay, more to that. It starts today if anyone wants to go into
But do you think this is this a lot of knickknacks, or is this true artisanship?
It looks a bit nicky-nacky to me.
Okay.
There's also a lady who makes olive oil and she plays Mozart music to it. We've heard that about wine.
Yes,
and now
especially in your household.
We're not going to go into that too much. But I did kind of want to go to the Mar-a-Lago story. But and also,
Andrew, are you across the Mar-a-Lago face story? Have you been?
No, I'm not. I'm waiting to be briefed.
Okay, so do you want to just still with the Mar-a-Lago?
Well, we were just Googling it, Gorana and I, now, just to get an idea, because I also wasn't across it, Andrew. I think it's a bit sort of that Miami bronze tan, copious amounts of Botox, outrageously smooth skin, puffy, blown-up canotto lips, as they call them in Italy, and a kind of a real
They call them canoe lips in Italy.
See, canotto. Like,
canotto lips.
Puffed up. In the old days, you used to puff up the canoes and jump into them on a lake or something. Anyway, so there's a piece of the New York Times where it's just talking about the casting of the Trump cabinet, and Gorana and I were talking about that before, and often when Trump announces his picks, he'll go for an aesthetic description of his pick rather than their necessary
qualifications.
Qualifications, exactly. But then there's also, staying on track with Trump, just the White House press room and Don Trump Jr. suggesting that his dad might elevate new media and podcasters to the White House press room. And that comes in line with this piece in the FT talking about how 3/4 of all U.S. cable audiences post-elections in the U.S. are all watching Fox, whereas CNN and MSNBC have dropped by 30-40%. Huge drops. In the previous Trump won election, a lot of people flocked to CNN, let's say, because it was sort of the reaction against what was coming in. That's not happening now. And most importantly, who is it that gets to pick who has access to the White House press room? Well, it's the White House themselves. So this is what Gorana's nodding. This is exactly what a lot of people are kind of worried about. Are we going to be having the Joe Rogan sitting in the front row and no CNN access whatsoever? For instance, I'm just mentioning CNN as one of the networks, but also MSNBC and the other ones.
Maybe on that note, and I think that's one of the things that I found very interesting now in the sort of wash-up of the election, that unlike 2016 and then early 2017, when there was this sort of sense of resistance in the United States across media as well. You know, Washington Post starts the campaign, Democracy Dies in Darkness, and all that. All of these news outlets record gigantic sort of jumps in their subscriptions. Now, actually, Washington Post had the opposite problem when Jeff Bezos ordered that they shouldn't be endorsing a presidential candidate. But all across the board, there is this sense that essentially people are fatigued. And there was a great piece in New York Mag a couple of weeks back around almost a pre-fatigue of Trump 2.0, because he is just throwing these nominations for the cabinet at a breakneck speed, and people kind of have a hard time following, what's the latest outrage, right? It's Matt Gaetz one day, Pete Hegseth the next day, right? All of these sort of Fox types, right? The kind of newscasts now entering the cabinet, and all of these kind of Mar-a-Lago faces, that people are just tired. And that's quite an interesting sort of development to where we've been back during the first administration.
Just before we went on air, we were talking about Bilanz magazine. Bilanz is you could say the German language, which also exists in French as well. Financial monthly of record. It's a little bit like Fortune, and they bring out their sort of annual 300 richest in Switzerland. So Andrew, okay, everyone guessed. Okay, Juliet, no, I'm not on the list, Juliet. So okay, who's number one? Andrew, any thoughts? I can't see if you're Googling there or not, but anyway.
No,
you don't have to be Swiss. You have to reside. You have to reside in Switzerland.
Okay.
So, okay. Anyone have a go?
Do one of the Mittals live in Switzerland?
Probably. The Mittals are skiing a lot in St. Moritz. I know that much. But I don't see them. I don't see them in the top 10. Juliet, get off your phone. Who do you think?
I'm too slow.
What sector?
What sector?
What sector might they be in?
Did Bezos move to Stad?
No, Bezos has not moved to Stad.
I shouldn't be doing this because I'm new here, but probably someone connected to some chocolate wealth, no?
Not well. Yeah, they might have some chocolate. One thing I can say though, when you go through the pages, there's a lot of Mar-a-Lago faces also in Switzerland.
No.
Yeah, I can imagine. Right?
No.
Chill surprise.
Who's number one? Come on, who's number one?
Number one with estimated fortune of around 40 billion is Gerard Wertheimer. So the family behind Chanel and many other businesses as well. Number two, it's the Hoffman Uri Dushmale clan. Of course, that is of Hoffman La Roche fame.
Oh, pharma.
Number three, we've got transport. Klaus Miguel Kühne. So Kühne Nagel. And of course, you see their big Navy trucks going all over the place. So logistics is number three. The Safra family, number four.
Saffron.
Not saffron, maybe appropriate for this time of year as well. You could be a billionaire. No, the Safra family, and then the Aponte family.
There we go.
MSC,
Shipping.
so MSC shipping. So interesting. Two out of the top five logistics. I mean, this country is quite good at. And then it sort of goes down. The Bertorellis are there, the Blochers, Firmenich as well.
Publishing.
Not a lot of media families in the top. No, not a lot of top media. Andrew, just on the Indian tip, the Hindujas are there though. Mr. Prakash Hinduja. There you go. So, around 11 billion or so. And then of course the Kamprad brothers. Johann Rupert as well. Of course, that is Richemont. Going back into that world. So there you go. Juliet, I don't see any Vinci's or Linleys on the list. Andrew, we're a little bit late for the headlines. Andrew, anything that's caught your eye? Nice Daily Mail story. What's the alternative to the Mar-a-Lago story? Anything else out of the UK today?
Maybe a little urbanist story, which is that the City of London Corporation, after much toing and throwing for many years, this week said that finally that they will be closing down Smithfield Meat Market right in the centre of the city, which has been there in some form since 975. So an extraordinary period of time. And what's amazing is even now, if you're out at dinner and you walk back through Smithfield from midnight to 5 o'clock, all the trucks are there bringing in the meat for the city. It's got all those restaurants that feed off of it, like Fergus Henderson's, Restaurant St. John. And all the roads there are named after the meat trade. So there's Cow Cross Street and Poultry Avenue. But there's a nice piece in the Telegraph by the Reverend Marcus Watson, who he's the chaplain to all the butchers, and he's written a really nice piece about the connection between church and the market. And I know it was just a nice evocation of what's about to be lost in the centre of London.
And just from the founder of the Urbanist program, the host of the Urbanist, what does it mean to you that, of course, you have a part of the city which is about to be redefined? We always talk about the loss of industry, the loss of true sense of place in cities, of its time, just because of the forces of what's happening in London, or could this have been rethought with maybe better planning, maybe downsizing? What's your take?
Well, obviously, many years ago, they moved the fish market out. They moved Covent Garden out to New Covent Garden. So these markets have been lost bit by bit. But I don't know. There's something about where it sits. It sits right next to the Barbican, so the culture world is right on its doorstep. The actual city of London, so all the finance goes on next to it, and it's just this mix that you get in a city that makes it so exciting and serendipitous. And actually, all the roads around there seem to be, Georgian weaving and curling. There's something very special about the neighbourhood. So you do worry that it's going to end up being another version of Covent Garden, maybe with nice shops and is
that the plan, that it becomes a big sort of mixed use development?
One part of it has already been shaved off, which is where they used to sell poultry, and that's been given to the Museum of London. So that would belong to them. And I think that there is some push for retail going in there, but other parts of it will also be given over to cultural activities. So it's not completely lost to the city, but it's not the same. And there is something amazing about when you come through there at night. You see all the porters stopping to have their tea in the winter. I don't know. It's just it's one of those things that make you realise you're in London. It makes you feel very special.
Andrew Tuck, our editor-in-chief in London. I'm going to leave you to get on with your Sunday. I believe Emma Nelson is not far away. She's got the almost bottom of the hour news headlines. Emma.
Thank you very much indeed, Tyler. Syrian government forces have withdrawn from the city of Aleppo following an offensive by rebels opposed to the rule of President Bashar al-Assad. The US President-elect Donald Trump has named Charles Kushner, the father of his son-in-law Jared Kushner, a convicted real estate mogul, to be ambassador to France. European Council President and the EU's foreign policy chief have just arrived in the Ukrainian capital Kyiv, using the first day in their new roles to send a message of support for Ukraine in its war with Russia. And the New York Times this weekend asks the question, did the world need a hot Santa? It got one anyway. A new series of adverts from Target features a store worker called Chris Kay, a weirdly hot version of Father Christmas. Some have debated whether Santa has been hitting the Ozempic and marvelled at his Ford Bronco. Others were less impressed by his voice, which was far higher pitched than they expected it to be. Back to you, Tyler, in Zurich.
Emma, do we need hot Santa? Because it's 2 weeks from today that it's the Christmas market in London. Well, 1 week from today, the Christmas market will be in full flow here. And so we do not have a Santa. Maybe we need a Santa. Mono-chan will be here, though. Not such a slender beast. But of course, Santa is well, not just prepping, but of course he is. But he will be making his way from Rovaniemi in the high north of Finland to London. And the Santa that visits Midori House is a jolly character. He's got a beard that goes down to his knees. But yeah, this sort of Target hot Santa, a rather refashioned version.
He is. I mean, he's Santa who's obviously been quite good with the skincare. He takes an awful lot of time with his hair, and perhaps he's quite good at chopping wood. I wonder whether Midori House will have to reserve a tiny little space in the fridge for the Ozempic vials just to keep them the right temperature. But no, I don't know. It's quite interesting what you all think of Hot Santa and Juliet. I mean, I think he just looks a bit weird.
Okay, Juliet, there it is. Hot Santa.
I wouldn't determine him. I wouldn't call him hot.
Okay.
Certainly not along my lines. What about you, Gorana? No, not really. I mean,
don't speak for Gorana. Let Gorana speak for herself. She might think he's hot.
We already discussed.
Oh, you already discussed
off
it.
Air.
We have.
Off air.
Yeah, I don't know. My husband has no beard, no mustache.
Neither
so
does mine.
But clearly hot. There you go.
Hot. Not Santa adjacent. Yeah, not in for that.
Emma, you haven't weighed in on this one though.
Emma, your husband has no beard.
My husband has no hair at all. Someone who spends that amount of time. Someone who spends that amount of time grooming, I don't have time for that, I'm afraid. They can. Someone who loves his beard more than he loves his partner. That's what the hot Santa looks like.
Oh, there you heard it.
And plus high pitched, we don't like high.
No, we don't do that at all.
That sounds like he's not wearing baggy Santa pants, clearly. Anyway, we'll leave it there. On Emma Nelson, thank you, in London. On the topic of, well, a place that was hot, but we certainly heard in the menu of the program a bit earlier, temperatures are plummeting in Turkey, maybe even in Istanbul, where we're heading now. Our correspondent, Lucinda Smith, is there. Good morning? No, good afternoon. Good morning. No, you 2 hours ahead or 1 hour ahead? I've been looking at my clocks, but I don't have Istanbul in my clock. Anyway, hello, Hannah.
Good afternoon. We're 2 hours ahead, so it's
You're
just
2 hours ahead of us. Okay.
Yeah.
We have some obviously some very serious topics to discuss. Certainly on the southern end of the country, which we'll come to, and maybe we'll get the fun stuff out of the way at the start of this. But let's just talk about we haven't really talked a lot about weather, so let's talk about what's happening at your end of the Mediterranean first.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it's certainly been very, very welcomed here in Turkey and elsewhere in the region as well. This sudden drop in temperatures that came a week ago, really breaking this record-breaking summer that we had in terms of temperatures, in terms of low rainfall, which has caused all kinds of problems, particularly with drought. We've seen the reservoirs feeding cities like Istanbul down to nearly empty. It's really been a big crisis over the past few years. And for the past few winters, we haven't really seen snow here in particularly Western Turkey. Usually Istanbul gets a bit of a covering, but places more in the interior, places like Konya, these are really the bread baskets of Turkey, and they usually get this kind of covering of snow in winter. It perks everything up. really sort of hydrates the land. And that hasn't happened for the past few years. So this is really a kind of welcome development here in Turkey.
Here's a side question. I was in the Gulf week before last. It's interesting when you go to a region, when you're in the GCC, how the GCC also really embraces Christmas in a way almost more pronounced in some ways than you see in parts of Europe. We'll be talking about Christmas markets a little bit later. Maybe not Turkey. What is Istanbul's relationship like with the Christmas season? Of course, you've got a major seat of a significant Christian church in the city, but at the same time, of course, you have a government. I'm not sure how all embracing they are of Santa, hot or otherwise.
Yeah, I've never heard Erdogan talking fondly about Santa, I have to say. But the Turks do have this really, really interesting relationship with Christmas in that they do everything that we do, put a tree up, they're big into Santa, but they do it for New Year. So they see it as a New Year's celebration. Of course, as you say, you do have Christian communities here. Of course, Istanbul was once Constantinople. You still have the Patriarch of Constantinople here in the city, but that's Orthodox Christmas. That comes on the 6th of January. So that's something slightly different, and that's all more kind of traditional. So they will do things like there's a tradition where they throw a cross into the Bosphorus and the young Greek Orthodox Christian men jump in and chase it. But yeah, it's quite bizarre here in Istanbul because obviously it is an overwhelmingly Muslim city, but you do see the kind of the trinkets of Christmas everywhere, particularly in the more secular neighbourhoods. There are, of course, people on the more conservative end of the spectrum who are not pleased about that. And in fact, every year in one of the districts of Istanbul called Fatih, which is really conservative, they have an annual Santa stabbing. So they have this kind of big blow up Santa and they attack it. And it's almost become a kind of...
It's like Santa Piñata, but with knives.
Exactly. I don't think we're meant to laugh at it, but it is quite...
But anyway... I just want to go on the topic of buying trinkets, though. You've got there's an interesting story circulating, which is about the circulation of millions of fake US dollar, well, not just dollar bills, but just US currency, and what is happening there.
Yeah, this is a story that broke this week and is causing a huge amount of headaches for Turkish banks and for money changers. So it emerged that there's a huge number, perhaps in value as much as $1 billion worth of $150 notes in circulation. The money changers and the banks have mostly just stopped accepting them because they are such good fakes that even the money counting machines cannot detect them. It takes a really skilled professional sort of checking by hand. Now, it's unclear still where these notes came from. It seems that they first emerged in the city of Gaziantep, which is in the south. It's close to the Syrian border, and some reports are saying they might have been manufactured in the Middle East, perhaps in Syria. I have to say, over the years, reporting in Syria and in Turkey, I've seen a huge amount of faked documents coming out of Syria, faked passports, degree certificates, driving licenses. It's a huge industry. So I think, there could be basis in that. But at the moment, while those investigations are ongoing, it's just causing a huge headache for traders here in Turkey.
Hannah, I just want to let's stay in Gaziantep, and of course, head across the border. Maybe you want to just bring us up to speed in terms of what has happened. We were sort of midweek, and this is the curious thing. Actually, going back to Dubai, I was with some Monocle subscribers last week, Maronites from Damascus, who are now living in Dubai, and they said, it's time for you to come back to Damascus. Let's go to Aleppo, and everything is great. And then now here we are, Aleppo. Whether the whole city is taken or at least a large part of it. And suddenly here's a story which is, completely bubbled up into the news again.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has been taken by surprise by this story. It started on Wednesday when opposition groups based in the northwest of Syria, so areas close to the Turkish border, some of those groups either tacitly or overtly supported by the Turkish government, started an advance towards Aleppo. Now, it's such a long time ago and it's so strange to think back on it, but back in 2011, of course, the rebels tried to do the same thing. Back at the time, they were the Free Syrian Army. They were far more secular. not necessarily united, but far more kind of revolutionary in their outlook, probably than a lot of the Islamist groups that are operating now. And they fought for 4 years to try and take that city, and they did not succeed. At the end of 2016, Assad, with the backing of Russian air power, entirely took back Aleppo. And now, in the space of 3 days, we've seen them, as you say, not take all of the city. There is still fighting ongoing, but they've certainly taken key positions. And just in the last few hours, we've heard that they seem to have taken control of some artillery bases in the city. And not only that, they've now advanced down towards the city of Hama, another major city, advancing further south towards Homs. And there are also clashes breaking out in the capital, Damascus. It really is a stunning advance.
Gorana, maybe just let's go to more of a background piece, because this is a story which had sort of dropped out of the news. Of course, there has been a simmering conflict. Of course, there's been skirmishes, but nothing as pronounced as what we've seen right now. Who are the players? Of course, there's also an eye off the ball component to all of this as well, given everything that has been happening elsewhere in the region. But maybe if you could give us a bit of context around this.
Okay.
I'm not saying 30 seconds or less. It's going to take a little bit longer.
It will take a little bit longer, but I think Hannah did a great job setting this up, because, of course, we have to understand that Syria, the conflict that has been going on there since 2011, 2012, has been one of these wicked problems of the Middle East, in a way that, it's the kind of the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy. And then there are like multiple vectors and multiple conflicts that have been going on and simmering all along, even though you said it has been one that has been largely deprioritized from the sort of Western policy-making agenda, as it seemed that over the past at least 6 years, Assad has more or less consolidated his power, despite some of the challenges, especially that have been going on either from the remnants of the extremist organizations or from the Kurds. But here, what I would say we need to understand is that this conflict has been front and center, or what's been going on in Syria, it has been front and center, A, for Turkey, and B, for Israel. So they have been quite active, actually, in launching various campaigns and strikes, depending on, each side's sort of strategic interests. So, of course, for Turkey, this has been the question of Kurds in northern Syria, and for Israel, the Iranian-backed militias and assets over there. And one thing that I have to actually mention here as well is that Donald Trump is returning to the office, and he actually, the first time that he authorized the use of force outside of the United States was actually against Syria, against Syrian government back in April of 2017, after the use of chemical weapons against the opposition on part of the Assad government. So where we are today, I think what's quite interesting here, the moment that this is happening, is Russia being preoccupied with what's going on, and Russia, of course, being the backer of Assad government, one of the key sort of patrons, if you want, in this kind of patron-client relations. Russia being preoccupied, of course, with Ukraine, with various other sort of involvements, and then, of course, Iran being very bruised, of course, given what has been going on in the broader conflict that's happening in Gaza, in Lebanon, and we've just had the announcement of the ceasefire just this week. And so it is not that great of a surprise that actually Assad has been unable to fend off the opposition, given that some of his key patrons have been either preoccupied or quite weakened. So it comes at a very indicative time. Now, the question is, what does the West do? Because the kind of start of the conflict, there was the famous Obama line, Assad must step down, right? And this was the kind of guiding thought. And this was actually for some maybe a kind of the red line that shouldn't have been drawn because it was never fulfilled, that there was the expectation that actually US would lead some sort of coalition in a way that we saw in Libya to actually oust the Assad regime. What is the West going to do now at this point, when it seems that the opposition is on the march, when it might potentially have some chance. I wouldn't place kind of a lot of faith into there being a kind of deeper involvement, but it's certainly interesting how this conflict that has been going on now for 12 years, basically, how again it's becoming dynamic as a result of the changing regional conflict dynamics, and it just shows that in the Middle East everything is very connected, right? And if you move pieces on one side of the board, it inevitably kind of has this sort of whack-a-mole effect somewhere else.
Hannah, just before we go, I'm always fascinated with the media component of a story like this. And again, sometimes we see these conflicts bubbling up. This sort of almost came out of nowhere, and this obviously demands a massive mobilization of various news forces to be in place for a story like this. And I'm wondering, just from is there a bit of a not quite home advantage, but how the Turkish media is there? Do you see that they're obviously embedded, of course, with some of the parties involved? I'm just wondering how the story is playing out in Turkish media.
Yeah, well, here's the interesting thing. So, yeah, I mean, media access in Syria has been really difficult for a long time. I mean, a decade ago, when, particularly in the northwest, when the fighting broke out there, as journalists, it was quite easy for us to access the conflict, actually, because the Turkish government kept the border open even after the rebel groups captured border crossings. So literally with your passport, you could go in and you could report. It was dangerous, of course, but it was possible to be there on the ground. Now, since 2015, Turkey has really militarized that border and secured that border. There's now a huge wall along it. It's entirely militarized. There's a military zone on the Turkish side. Of course, people smugglers do still get people through, principally kind of Syrians desperate to escape. But in terms of being a journalist, you now have to get permission from the Turks if you want to go into rebel-controlled Syria. And that, of course, comes with media minders. It comes with sort of time-limited conditions. So it's really interesting. Turning on the Turkish TV at the moment, of course, the pro-government Turkish channels have exceptional access. For the rest of us, unfortunately, for quite a long time now, several years, we've been really, really reliant on talking to people who are inside the country. And of course, those are people who have their own interests and their own slant on things. Yeah, that's one of the reasons, I think, why, Syria has fallen off the agenda in places like the UK and also in America, and also because politically, ever since ISIS was kind of defeated territorially, it sort of fell off the agenda. But here in Turkey, it's never fallen off the agenda. You have probably more than 4 million Syrian refugees here in Turkey. You also, of course, have Turkish involvement in terms of backing certain rebel groups, and Turkey's fear about the expansion of Kurdish armed groups in Syria as well. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at it from a Turkish angle, A, it's still very much on the news agenda, and B, there are certain Turkish journalists with their own certain agendas who are still able to get in there.
And Lucinda Smith, our correspondent in Istanbul, thank you very much for that. It's just coming up to 10 to the hour here just past 10 to the hour here in Zurich. Going away for a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking Christmas markets.
What can you learn in a minute? More than you think if you subscribe to Monocle's daily email newsletter. The Monocle Minute provides fresh analysis of breaking news and direct to your inbox insights on everything from global affairs to entrepreneurship. On Saturdays with the weekend edition, we'll widen your horizons with wry observation, drinking and dining recommendations, and must-know openings. Subscribe now at monocle.com/minute.
And you're back with Monocle on Sunday with me, Tyler Brûlé. Just wrapping up here in Zurich, Christmas market season in full flow. I'm happy to say that, sort of the Mrs. Claus of at least part of this. Katja Weber is here, one of the founders of not just one, but what has really sort of become a bit of proliferation of many markets around the city is here today. Good morning, guten Morgen. Very nice to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. So listen, we have this sort of great competition across many cities. I was in Paris early in the week and some visitors from Montreal were saying, okay, which Christmas market should I go to? Of course, I said, get on the bloody TGV and Lyria and come to Zurich. I think they might have ended up in Strasbourg, but you've got many cities to compete with. Tell us why people need to come to Zurich. What are you doing differently here?
Well, it's pretty new that we do Christmas market in that way. So I think we had a chance to kind of grow it from scratch more or less 10 years ago. And you can't imagine that Zürich did not have any of this tradition, because our neighboring countries and cities do have this, or did have the tradition since more than 500 years plus. We only started like 10 years ago, and we did not.
Why? But what was not going on in Switzerland? What were the forces that there wasn't this market? Because this is, it's always, if you think back, I mean, of course, many decades, centuries, it has been a place of commerce. It's odd that the market didn't exist.
Well, my theory one is that Switzerland and Zurich in particular is more Protestant, more this Zwingli type of city,
yes,
where they did not go into this Catholic, festive season with such a big effort. But I think they kind of like it, so I think they just like missed out many years of celebration.
Okay, so tell us the Zurich version, and of course I could set it up, but it's better that you do so. What is different? Because if I went to Nuremberg, if I went to Munich, if I found myself in Vienna, you've got, of course, the luxury of almost in a way starting from scratch. So what are you doing different here?
Yeah, well, you have to differentiate what we do. I am the founder of the biggest Christmas market, the Christmas Village, that we have at this beautiful square in front of the Opera House at the tip of the lake. I mean, this already says so much about it. The square is super new. When we came, it was like set up for only 2 years. So it's spacious, 16,000 square meters, which is one of the biggest places in whole Europe to set something like this up. So we had the chance to anchor more than 120 stalls. We kind of built them in a very similar way, so it really looks like a built-up European tiny village, a little bit based on the idea of the Niederdorf, the oldest part of Zurich, which has like more than 1,000 years of tradition. There are houses from the 12th, 13th century. So we tried to kind of recreate this on a very new space. All has the same color. We place indoor and outdoor stalls. As it calls like village, we are like a family in ourselves. So our market grew out of a long background, which we already had in doing markets. So we kind of had designers markets, tiny ones everywhere in the city. We had food markets beforehand. And we started, out of this experience, creating this tiny family thing. And I say tiny in a way, even though it's spacious, it feels tiny, cozy, and a chance, a space, a place where people can pre-celebrate Christmas season.
Juliet, of course, on the Catholic note, someone who used to cover the Vatican, what type of Christmas market are you keen on? Do you want sort of, hardcore tradition, or are you happy if there's also some gyozas and other things as well? Or you only want...
I know why you're asking me. Yeah. Last weekend, we talked about this precise thing, and I did say that it was a bit... questionable, just all of these ethnic foods, and as you all know, I have a very multiple ethnic background, so I can say this, but like I was kind of considering that instead of the gyozas and the dripping kebabs that my son seems to get all over his clothes, it would be nicer to have just maybe the traditional sort of gingerbread and cinnamon. But I do know that it is a multi-ethnic city, and you have to, of course, embrace everything. And I did want to say how beautiful I do find the Dorf, and I didn't know that it was like spatially one of the biggest in Europe. That's a fun fact to know. And I love how this square can be turned into so many different things.
It can be a circus, it can be a film festival, it can be a Christmas market. It's
World Cycling Championship finals took place in there. It becomes a Ferris wheel. It's incredible, and you've done an incredible job of that despite the gyozas. Nothing against gyozas.
Thank you so much. I think it's also, I love this particular point because we thought it is a multi-ethnical idea behind it. We would rather call it holiday market, but of course that's like Christmas.
Why? Because we can't say Christmas anymore?
Well, you can say this, but I think we have like 30% of the citizens in Zurich are from all over the world, and we wanted to create a Christmas market that is from and for the people living, co-creating Zurich. So I think that this, is a bit of our heritage, and it's good that you can feel this, because I'm super happy that you can see it, and you still hopefully see some very traditional things. So we still have the rösti, we still have the fondue.
Everyone as well. So Gorana, are you a Christmas market fan?
Well, I spent the past 15 years living in Sydney, Australia. So for me, when, they started playing Last Christmas and it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, that meant you go and buy, SPF 50 and you usually are in for these heat waves of 40 degrees Celsius. So this is quite a nice change. But I have to say, and this is not being paid by the Croatian or Zagreb Tourist Board, but Zagreb, where I come from, actually has been named one of the best Christmas market places by the CNN. Not just saying, but it actually has become a thing also there. And even though it is a predominantly Catholic country, it actually hasn't been a thing for, it just started similar to Zürich just very recently. So.
Katja, just before we go, 30 seconds or less, when does everything run till? And we're talking about Bellevue, but there's many other outposts as well for our listeners. Where else can they also find, the magical experience of the extended also villages around Switzerland?
Yeah, I think this is the beauty of Zurich, that we newly became, it started with us 10 years ago, and obviously there were some traditional markets before, but now a lot of other things started. Alongside, I would say, Bahnhofstraße and the lake, where you go to Europaallee. Since last year, there's a very new Christmas market, more focusing on younger people, so with a karaoke stall and things like that.
I'll be there.
And the Illuminarium, which is a light show, which is super particular for Zurich.
Excellent. Katja Weber, super seeing you. Of course, Christmas market here at Dufourstrasse next week. Huge thanks to Juliet, Linley, Grgić, also Emma Nelson. Also my thanks to Andrew Tuck, Hannah Lucinda Smith in Istanbul, and of course Katja Weber, our producers today, Desiree Bentley, also Emma Nelson, Steph Chungu back in London. I'm Tyler Brûlé. I will be back here at the microphone next week. See you then. Goodbye.